Discernment. It's a word we hear often enough, but what does it really mean and why do we need it? Most of us use a form of discernment every day, unconsciously when we're going about our daily business. We are continually deciding what to listen to and what to ignore, what takes our interest and what doesn't. But the discernment to which I now refer is to be used in places where perhaps we haven't used it enough before, and it should really start with an internal investigation. We have to deal with our core emotional balance first, and for some of us a renewed agreement with authenticity is on the cards. It's time to finally clear out any unwanted emotional blockages that can affect the way we see the world around us. Discernment has to start within, and it requires an honest self-investigation of your emotional well-being. We all tend to know those social media users that are often seen posting feel-good messages of wisdom, when sometimes you get the feeling that they are the ones that need it the most. We have become masters of appearing balanced and wise, whilst brushing our own anxieties under the carpet. We have become good at ignoring our own emotional needs. We are easily distracted within our busy lives, but there will always be situations on our paths that test our emotional stability, especially if it's been left unaddressed for so long. It takes strength to use honest internal awareness, but until we're able to look at ourselves and truly understand who we are, our ability to make empowered choices may be limited, and this is also where we can sleepwalk into trouble. The best way to understand the world around us is to be able to see it with a clear mind. Otherwise, we become emotionally susceptible to external turbulence and the narratives of others that are all around us. The unsettled mind is our weak spot, and this predisposition plays beautifully into the hands of those that are determined to sell you their version of events. If the mind cannot rediscover its own natural strength and balance, and it is there, you will desire to seek the stability from the perceived safety of elsewhere, and there are no shortage of takers for that job. Those that have learned to ignore their own emotions, even when they appear to be outwardly balanced, tend to have less time or tolerance and space to use their own discernment, and instead will prefer to brush off anything that could be slightly out of the ordinary as foolish trivia. They tend to follow the perceived safety of a crowd on a socially acceptable path without really giving it much thought. They've already got too much on their plate and it's just easier that way. So we really need to know the difference between what truly represents us or what may be more representative of our anxieties and fears. This can only be done for the self by the self, and no one else can do it for you. They can certainly help, but the first steps are always yours, and intention is everything. By simply acknowledging that there are areas that need attention, the healing process can start. The heavy emotional bags for a moment can be dropped as we reconsider our load. We may never be able to heal all emotional wounds, and may need help identifying the specific areas of concern. But in order to face the world with a greater amount of discernment, we must be authentic with our emotions first. We must be honest with ourselves. This is a form of emotional surrender, and the process is humbling. And in turn, it becomes easier to accept, allow, and address the world, and the way you see your role within it. Once we have a better, more authentic understanding of ourselves, and none of us are perfect, we can at least start to see the world around us using a little more intuition or gut instinct. We need to approach quietly and question everything, including the words you're hearing right now. After all, these are just 21 chapters of another person's perspective, who now happens to be talking about his findings. Do I have another agenda? Could this be one long advert? Am I trying to appeal to your better natures? Why? Am I religious? Am I political? It's time to use your discernment and listen to your own thoughts. Your standpoint in your happiness is really not about what others think. Make your own minds up. Employ a little critical thinking. Don't buy wholeheartedly into what I say until you're sure. However, critical thinking does not mean cynical thinking. Cynicism is a closed mental state, and it's precisely what we need to avoid. And cynical thinkers tend to be more vocal and polarizing, and rarely ever look any further from their chosen narrative. If someone has a message for you and you don't personally know them, then it's time for a little discernment. Critical thinking activates your overall awareness, but it's your instincts that generally serve you, as it'll pick up on the subtle clues that may not be so obvious in the moment. Discernment means that you question the message and the messenger, and perhaps we should start by exploring the way in which it's presented to you. So what about the message you're hearing from me right now? Why am I saying this? So ask yourself, does it feel like I've been trying to sell you into a concept? Well, maybe. How would it benefit me or those around me to do so? What tones have been used throughout? Is there any kind of insistence that you should believe me? And where am I asking you to place your emotional well-being, and what is your gut telling you? Keep in mind that mental conditioning doesn't always have to have an obvious destination to the casual observer, so it doesn't always serve to dwell on the possible whys. It's more important to focus on the dubious or confused feelings the narrative provokes within you. Time to make a mental note and stick a question mark on that subject until more is revealed to you. Advertisers and politicians, amongst others, spend a vast majority of their time appealing to our unconscious minds, and the less you realize it, the more effective it is for them. We are bombarded with messages from different platforms every day. Of course, many of these messages are simply meant to inspire us and keep us safe from harm, and they have your best interest at heart. It is a relatively simple transaction of information, which means you can just feel it as you hear it, and so your emotional clarity is not affected. This is discernment being used in a positive way. It just feels right, and as such the information tends to be more easily absorbed. Even when the situation is complex, or it's not the news you'd particularly like to hear, it can still be presented in such a way that is informative. It just seems to sit well. Authenticity just resonates this way. Information should be empowering you to make your own choices. And more often than not, you'll see these types of messages on a local level, because locally we tend to be more accountable, and therefore more likely to display authentic behaviours. Of course, we should try and be open to the concept of getting it wrong, as this is also part of the ongoing discernment process. Sometimes what you know for sure just isn't so. In today's world, it has become more apparent that the bigger the message and the messenger gets, the more discernment we should try and use. One size does not always fit all. Once again, it's not about cynical thinking, it's about critical thinking. So what are the more forceful type of messages that should trigger our discernment process? Well, perhaps when you hear things similar to, "I've got all the facts, I'm an expert," "I'll look after you," "Terrible things may happen," "I'm right, they are wrong," "You must believe me, you need me," "Trust me," "No need to look elsewhere." Good information should not need to be sold to us in this way. A more common way to condition folk is to create a problem and then to supply the solution, i.e., in order to be saved from this particular fear, we must take these measures, or behave in a certain way, or buy a product, or read this book, vote this way. This has been the keeping you needing us formula for decades. It's all around us. So what are the discernment red flags? When you're faced with information that has the ability to affect your emotions and behaviours, then it's time to evaluate the message and the messenger. Has the messenger demanded your trust? Why? The truth has an emotional transparency to it. It's normally humble. It resonates. It really shouldn't require a trust me advert. Do you feel like you've been given authentic, quality information? Do you feel informed, enlightened, and empowered to act? Or has it left you emotionally unbalanced in a way that really isn't you? Have you been asked to disbelieve or ignore other sources for your own good? Well, this is never a positive sign, as it indicates you're not wise enough to decide for yourself, or that the messenger is overly protective of their own narrative. Authenticity is transparent and it's fearless because it is what it is. Do you think the messenger has used their own discernment? Or does it feel overly scripted, matter-of-fact and final? Even good people with good hearts can pick up on misleading narratives. That's okay. Be kind. It's their journey, not yours. How much of the information is designed to affect you emotionally, and how much of it is constructive and helpful? Emotional narratives that stem from fear, such as anger or sadness, have the ability to mask and override level-headed judgment. This is not a mistake. Awareness is 90% of the battle here. Emotional conditioning and the study of advertising psychology has been around us for many decades. And whereas most of us think we are media savvy, I'm sure we've all been hooked into buying something we never really needed at some point. We commonly see this employed by showroom sales teams. For instance, pushy sales staff were sometimes required to get 5 yeses from potential customers before they tried to close a deal. It starts with a sales patter that would involve open questions that are designed to get you talking and thinking along the right lines, such as, how do you think you could make use of this clever product? Or, what kind of holiday do you and your family enjoy? It opens up a dialogue and locks you in for a conversation. After a series of open-ended questions, the discussion is in full flow, and you would then be hit with the 5 closed questions that are designed to ensure all answers are met with a yes to start conditioning the mind. The first question may be as simple as, are you sitting comfortably? Yes. Followed by, have you been offered a drink? Yes. Can you see how useful this product could be? Yes. Perhaps you can understand why we've sold so many? Yes. Can you see how this product would make your life easier? Yes. If they've managed to obtain their yeses, then it's time to close the deal with hopefully a final yes. Of course, these overly obvious strategies have moved on to more sophisticated ways, but the conditioning objectives have not changed. The less the consumer knows about your sales strategy, the more effective it is. The best salespeople are those who appear not to be following any script at all, but rather to be behaving naturally to the customer, who in turn unconsciously finds themselves in deep conversation about a product or a narrative. A good salesperson or politician knows they will always have to sell themselves to the customer first. It generates trust, and with trust comes control. And these sales strategies are not limited to the car showroom. You'll start to see it everywhere when your awareness is awakened to the concept. We know that most religions are there to inspire and help people, underpinned with love and compassion. But they in the past have also been guilty of using this kind of strategy in order to recruit. sometimes focusing on those that have emotional unaddressed imbalances that feel particularly low or vulnerable. Discernment will allow you to make the right choices for you. You'll discover that not all purveyors of information are bad. Of course, many are simply conveying messages from one entity to another, providing an awareness or hopefully a decent service. Unfortunately, we're only all too aware of the more sinister types. Over the years, it has been generally safe to assume that many of the large companies that appear to care for us are really more concerned with profits. Watch how the insurance giants increase prices for those customers that don't shop around at renewal time. They'll take as much as they dare. Old age pensioners don't always know to check their premiums against the competition, as they have wrongly assumed that long-term customers are valued. But sadly, quite often it's the opposite, and it's always the vulnerable or unaware that pay the price. Small print stealth charges protected by commercial law are a favourite with utility companies, insurances, holidays, banking fees, broadband contracts, airlines and main dealer car repairs, to name but a few. Even funeral homes will charge ridiculous amounts to unsuspecting grieving families. Misleading sales strategies are also too common, like deceptive food labels that offer 25% bigger packets, whilst the food quantity inside remains the same as before, or the curved bottom packet that reduces food quantity but fools the eye. This list is never ending, and these are the guys with the power and the resources that we're being asked to blindly trust. It's not entirely their fault, because fat cats and their close relationships with political enablers sit at the very top of the tree, setting the example. Once again, we must shoulder some of the blame, as we've been also too busy striving for success ourselves to take much notice. We all run on the same hamster wheel, so it just keeps turning. So here we have Tier 1 companies and powerful entities with familiar household names that will effectively harvest from you as much as they can. Success has always been the priority for most commercial enterprises, and once again, many of them provide a good level of service that we need or desire, or at least they appear to. So we don't complain too much. But in terms of the small print, we have grown accustomed to the systematic lack of integrity within our commercial and political mainstream services for decades. And then we should probably remind ourselves of the power other media outlets once had over us, and in many sectors still do. There are some newspapers and news teams which have largely dispensed with investigative journalism to become more like press release agencies. And we need not to be reminded that entire countries with educated people can be heavily influenced by conditioning with horrific consequences. We like to think it could never have happened to us. In the more modern world, choice conditioning was achieved when everybody was represented in the arguments with their own brand of newspaper. The working classes, the educated, the rich, the poor, all reading from a paper that would represent them with either left or right views. It's called the illusion of choice, and it's been going on for centuries. As the politician and disgraced senator for New York, William McGeer Tweed once said, "I don't care who does the electing, as long as I get to choose the candidates." The big powerful media agencies are generally run by the same people who can quite often provide different routes to the same destination. If the choices are controlled with the illusion of options, then the outcome can be predetermined. Different agencies, different narratives, same people, same destination. Whereas the pushy salesman gets his 5 yeses to relax the subject's mind, trust and reader confidence is obtained by reporting well on many issues of the day. They can be informative, helpful and interesting, amazing nature articles and wonderful dramas, authentic, concerning and heartwarming reports about nature, etc., etc. So when the special news report is slipped in, it can be very hard to spot, stealthy and covert, finishing off with a little sport. No harm comes from using a little discernment, and we've been sleepwalking long enough. This was, of course, until the internet became our real-time informer. Yes, there is a lot of misinformation out there, but if you choose to do a little searching, authenticity tends to shine. We can now effectively do our shopping wherever we like. I personally like to see what all the shops have on offer. My choices don't necessarily all come from the one shop. We can either have the choice to be fed, or we can feed ourselves. The internet has given the masses the ability to cross-reference and investigate the issues for themselves. We can now cook, build, repair, discover, buy, share, inspire, laugh, and offer compassion and support where it's needed the most, and most importantly, be informed. So in that respect, investigative journalism never really died. It just found its way into our sitting rooms. It's about finding a balance of being informed and not being overwhelmed with information specifically selected for you by others. One quick look at the world clearly shows us that the spoon-fed strategy has not worked out well for us so far. But times have changed, and they are still changing and will continue to do so. Discernment requires a little research at times, which then becomes even more important if one media source or outlet tries to persuade you that you shouldn't. Some even try to ridicule or even try to ban the thoughts of others. What an odd thing to do. Once again, authenticity isn't afraid of anything. It just is what it is. There will be people that insist that this is just tinfoil hat wearing paranoia. Well, yes, that could be very well the case. Please, look into it. Knowing when to trust someone or something is not always easy, but being able to listen to our emotional guidance systems must be part of your decision-making process. Discernment will allow us to see what serves us, what feels right and what doesn't. It may be hard for some to imagine right now, but I predict authenticity will be tomorrow's selling point, as many people are becoming more self-empowered as if waking up from a trance. As awareness grows, ineffectual and harmful practices will simply fall away as new technologies and ideologies will be allowed to emerge. Times are changing more so now than ever before. Our planet and its inhabitants have been neglected for long enough. And our perceptions of the world around us are also changing. The next generation will be demanding authenticity and integrity from the systems in place. The outlook may look bleak to some, but only if you look through the eyes of the old systems. It's pretty exciting if you're able to envision through the eyes of the new. There is so much cleverness and beauty waiting in the wings. Patience. It is my belief that there will be much greater desire for self-sufficiency in the near future, and in turn, those who are trusted with the power to make decisions for communities will be recognized as a position of privilege that is to be bestowed to a worthy candidate rather than grabbed by the best connected individuals or highest bidder. Decentralizing and democratizing systems to a more local and accountable level will perhaps be the obvious way forward, as the combined awareness of the internet global community and the open sourcing of information will allow for this kind of mass synchronization. Personally, I'm pretty excited about tomorrow. Trust your instincts. They'll serve you well if given half the chance. But please, don't just take my word for it.